Thank you very much. Let me first of all thank Charles for inviting me to join this discussion, very important discussion, and to share a few perspectives on the Ghana's energy transition, one of the few countries in Africa that has developed an energy transition plan. We are about launching the investment plan for our energy transition, hopefully in 2 weeks' time. So I may not be able to discuss the details, but I'll give perspectives, especially as they relate to policy and the politics of energy transition. Charles has been a very good friend, a brother. Today is actually one of the few days I saw him in suit. We've been in the trenches together. But having said that, Ghana's current greenhouse gas emissions totaled around 16 metric tons of carbon dioxide. And this is as of 2020. And the energy sector accounts for around half of this. And so people ask, what do you want to decarbonize if you haven't carbonized? Okay. Ghana's story is different, it's the opposite. Because we started mainly with hydropower. And my friend from ASEP is here, Ben. We started with hydropower, largely hydro, except few diesel plants, in the capital. We had hydropower from Akosombo, which gave us excess capacity at the time. And so for 30 years, since we built Akosombo, we relied on hydro. And so if you are to go by that, then it will mean that Ghana, as far as our power sector is concerned, was already decarbonized. Then in the 90s, we started adding thermal generation. And so we went from decarbonization to carbonization. And now we are talking about decarbonizing. So ours is that of the difference from those who started with carbonized sector, energy sector, and then they are now seeking to decarbonize. And so we've run some models which show that cumulative CO2 emissions could rise to around 150 metric tons by 2060, if nothing is done at all, business as usual scenario. This still means that Ghana's emissions level is low. And it will be low, even in 2060. And so some have asked, since we started the development of our energy transition plan, is it necessary at all? Why should we spend time developing an energy transition plan? But I think it is important to put this in context. The development of an energy transition plan is not just about reducing emissions, but there are opportunities that come with any change in the policy environment. And therefore, if your policy environment is changed by circumstances beyond your control, advanced countries are emitting so much, and we are an open economy. We are not an island. And so certainly we are affected by development elsewhere. So you have a change in your policy environment. You have to design a policy to address that change, whether it is going to be negative or is going to be positive. And that will be the basis on which a country like Ghana will develop an energy transition plan. But what are the effects of emissions? So even though our emissions levels have been low, we see the effects of climate change affecting us everywhere, particularly in the northern part of our country. So the World Bank estimates that since the 1960s, the average number of hot days in Ghana increased by 20%. That's not small. If you want to quantify the effect such increase in temperatures will be on our climate, for example. An average number of hot nights increased by 16%. So from 1960 to date, you have number of hot days increasing, number of hot nights increasing. You have the next 40 years. What do you expect will be the situation as far as the effect of climate change is concerned? And this is why a country like Ghana must be ready to confront not just issues relating to domestic emissions, but also the effects that come with the global, climate changes. And so what contribution do we have to make as a country? Even if it is on moral grounds, what contribution? If others have emitted so much, which is affecting all of us, do we even have to also contribute even one CO2 emission? Because that will go to add to the cumulative effect of climate change. And so that is number one. But number two is what I talked about earlier, the opportunity that it brings that we want to harness. Let me give an example of something that happened to Ghana recently. So we went to Europe to buy buses, transport buses. And the company we went to order these buses in Europe has 99.9% of its portfolio concentrated in electric cars. We were the only country that ordered for the combustible buses, diesel fuel buses from that company, a well-known company. And only one client, one country, came ordering for fuel, diesel fueled buses. And then they told us, look, the cost of the buses you are ordering is more than the average cost of the buses we manufacture here. That's number one. Number two, the time of delivery of your order is going to be longer than our average time of delivery for other buses. Are you ready? So that's the reality you are faced with. If others are changing and you do not change, okay, you are confined to a market of last resort and you will suffer the consequences. So this is why a country like Ghana, just like many other small countries in Africa, may want to develop a transition plan so that you are not just also reducing your emissions, because any little emissions you have contributes to the global emission. You are not just reducing your emission, but you are also positioning yourself to take advantage of the opportunity that comes with the transition. So, for example, the guiding principles of our energy transition, number one, is investment. How do we create conditions for investment into our energy system? By pursuing an energy mix that is aligned with international investor appetite. Number two, we want to build new growth sectors so that we can optimize for macroeconomic benefits. Number three, energy security and trade balance. We are a small producer of oil, and that was one of the reasons many people kicked against Ghana's attempt to develop an energy transition plan. And so you will hear alleged conspiracy with Western forces, for example, that wants to kill our oil industries are the people who are pushing and imposing this idea of energy transition on us. And so, in developing an energy transition, you're going to be confronted with two scenarios in terms of the speed of your transition: slow transition or accelerated transition. And issues such as conspiracy to kill an oil industry in Ghana will come up. And so our citizens, when we went around consulting with them, said, oh, but why don't we want to benefit from our oil industry? The revenue we are generating from oil, why do we want to transition away from that? And so instead of accelerated transition, we want you to have a delayed transition. And what do we mean? Some said 2080, 2090. And the reasons were justifiable to some extent. Because you are generating revenue, you are going to lose that revenue as soon as you do accelerated transition. So people were right. But whether their opinions can help with developments as we face the reality of the whole world, particularly countries that invest in our economy, in our oil and gas industry, are themselves curtailing the financing of those industries. Well, what do we do? So you have the other reality you have to encounter. And so we had to finally accept a net zero target of 2070. And so we developed an energy transition framework that targets net zero at 2070. And then you are faced with the reality thereafter. So in our consultations with the investor community, with development partners, and some experts, including my brother